Welcome to Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey, and I am once again joined to talk about Halloween Kills by Spencer Perry. Spencer, welcome again.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. We talked about 78, we talked about 2018, and how they sort of feel like direct follow-ups, or a direct follow-up to the original. How did you feel about Halloween Kills sort of on a top level?
What do you mean?
Just like a general, did you vibe with this movie?
Oh yeah,
or was it a little whatever?
There's certainly things that don't work about it, and a lot of the storytelling is pretty clunky for me. It really comes to a slowdown. Honestly, at the very beginning of the movie, when they're reintroducing all the legacy characters, Tommy Doyle, Lindsay Wallace, Lonnie Elam, and then Nurse Marion, whose presence makes no sense to me in this movie because
they're all best friends. Every victim is a best friend.
Yeah, it's one of those things you're like, I get why they brought her back because she's one of the few people that was in that movie that is still alive.
Yeah,
but like that seems, and it played a little better for me when I watched it a second time, but it's still a little clunky. But this movie really embodies its title in a hardcore way. And for me, that's what really elevates it and made it very enjoyable was, just the mayhem that Michael Myers could cause when he was on screen. And I'm not discounting any of the criticisms that people have against the movie because I think some of them are valid, though I do think there is a little bit of venom for this movie that it does not necessarily deserve. But
let there be carnage.
Exactly, and there is. I haven't seen Venom 2, but I believe there's probably more carnage in Halloween Kills than in Venom Let There Be Carnage.
oh yeah. That's the Venom 2 is a movie.
But obviously it's not quite to the level of 78 or 18, but I think it's really good when you look at the tableau of all the Halloween franchise. It's better than most of the other sequels, so not that that's a high bar to leap over, but whatever, it's a fun time at the movies. That's about all you can ask for.
Yeah, you can critique, but it's not complain, basically. Like there's I'm sort of in the same boat. It's definitely, it's got kind of severe pacing issues for me. Starting out at the very beginning, like, don't start it out with finding Hawkins and then going to the flashbacks. Just start with the flashbacks. Do the Return of the King, like we see Gollum get the ring. Like that would have started everything out a little bit better. And then the where the movie actually slowed down the most for me was in the final act when we're focused on the mob in the hospital. And that was sort of like, you could cut that whole section out because I think there's a moral that's trying to be taught in that section that doesn't really need to be there. Like we know mob justice is sort of not a great thing. Like we've seen Frankenstein. It's fine. Right. We've seen Beauty and the Beast. It's fine. But yeah, it got a little heavy-handed for me in that segment, and it just goes on for like 12 minutes. And so if you cut that down and made this a leaner, like 90 minutes, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more, despite the other things that I am a little more like critical about, but lenient on, like the crash zooms and stuff that are in this movie. They're like a little excessive. I do appreciate the like that Green's sort of like leaning in on a little bit of schlock. It is sort of disassociated with the last movie because of that, but like those, I would be fine with those like crash zooms with the black background, which it's those literally felt like the scenes in Ninja Turtles 90 when they're like doing the flashbacks of like when Splinter sees his master killed and stuff. It's a little bit weird to me that they're used as often as they are, but like whatever. I'd be fine if it was a little bit less. Whatever, it's okay. But yeah, some of the like the legacy actors, while I appreciate it, not necessarily up to snuff with the other people in the movie at this point.
That was a thing for me that was a little sad. Was, you know, I can appreciate bringing Charles Cyphers back as Brackett, but he was a great actor in, you know, Assault on Precinct 13 and Halloween 2, but it was just one of those moments where you're like, oh, he's old now and he's not really a great actor anymore, and it's, you know, that's not really a fault of him, it's just a fault of aging, you know.
And it's like the character has like a weird 180 moment out of nowhere where it's like, no, yeah, I'm part of the gang, and then like sees the guy die and it's like, being in the gang, this is a bad idea. Like, all right, you seem like you have a vendetta for 40 years. Right. So, but like on the reverse side of that, I do like the moment when on the opposite sides of the hallway, you see Karen and you see Tommy kind of have that like, oh shit moment. But like, yeah, it doesn't work with, you can't force that moment of realization on everybody. It works for Tommy because he's the one sort of rallying everybody up. But yeah, like seeing a character that at this point seems like it's a character out of like Naked Gun at this point. Like, how's he still on payroll? I know in Massachusetts, like there's forced retirement for police officers at 65. So I don't.
He's already got in the hospital. He's not in the sheriff's department.
That's true. Yeah, I guess that's true. He is still wearing a brown uniform, and that's why I was confused about it. But yeah, so that's and then the other thing, my honestly, my biggest gripe about this movie is Karen. Because she had the best moment of the last movie, like the most like stand up in your seats and cheer moment of the last movie with the gotcha, and to see her like within minutes, basically, like they get to the hospital and she's like back to old school. I'm like, no, you need to progress. You need to keep going that way. So that was just a bit of a bummer for me to see that, because it was to go from such a high with that character to like reverting back to her old ways was just sort of a letdown. But yeah, like the positives, like the kills in this are fantastic. Like,
yeah, they're pretty nuts.
Big John's eye pops. Like they're like the last, it's weird though, because like the last movie, they're just pretty gruesome. Like you see a head get smashed like a pumpkin. You see, like, it's pretty intense, but like even though stuff in this is more intense, it's like comically intense because it's so much further beyond. It's that Tarantino like cartoon blood almost. But the weird thing for me is like the surgery scene is hard for me to watch. Like I can't watch somebody just going like, yeah, I'm helping now. But it's a weird juxtaposition that I have with, I can watch decapitations all day. If I see a broken arm that is like a severe broken arm, I am gonna pass out. But not like I could, like the guy that the mob was going after. His arm was very severely broken, amongst other parts of his body. But I still had no problem seeing that. It is a surgical procedure. Is where I was like, I'll look again in a second.
Yeah. Luckily it's not that long of a scene, so it's okay. You know, one of my favorite things about kills, though, and it's something that I haven't really stopped thinking about since I have watched it, is I loved the flashbacks, and I didn't
unbelievable.
I didn't know that I knew that there were flashbacks. There were rumors for a long time that there were flashbacks, and then
there's like, if you're somebody like me, you look at IMDb and you see like a bunch of the original actors who probably aren't coming back for a new role. Yeah.
But then, I just love the way those flashbacks, they really went out of their way to make sure that they matched the visual tone of the first film. The blues look very similar. There's some sort of film grain effects on those sequences that make them look really cool. But then also, just the mask.
The Loomis
mask. It's the closest I have ever seen anyone come to replicating the mask from the 78 movie. More so than any other movie in this franchise does it look exactly like that mask. And it was, I just loved those moments. They were so great.
That's kind of funny too, is like in the original run of movies, when you get through like, is it 5 that has the worst mask? Is it that one?
This is pretty terrible, yeah.
Where it's so like, you'd think that if they have a prop department actually making it at that point, that they'd actually be able to get a closer replication rather,
Well, and you would also think that, there was a 3-year gap between 1 and 2, but you'd think they would have kept it.
Right,
like the mask somewhere.
Like Carpenter would have at least put it in a closet or something.
Right, yeah. But even then, they have to have a new mask because it's a new production, and even then, it doesn't match, what they had 3 years prior. It's
meanwhile with like this one and 2018, like it straight up, it has the hole in the neck from when Laurie hits him with the So it's like
it's actually ripped now in Halloween Kill.
But like, speaking of masks, and this is where I thought you were going with it, like the Loomis mask is crazy.
Well, it's not even so much a mask, it's a guy.
It's a guy, but it's like it was still a one-piece prosthetic that they put onto him. So like they obviously got somebody that looks as close as possible to him, but like it's still like, I still think Rogue One looked fine for what it was, but like this might be the best way to do it now, to go back to the old ways. I know CG is like the automatic default, but like this looked unbelievable. What was that?
If you're Lucasfilm, CG is the default.
Well, yeah. I mean,
if you're a Blumhouse,
any of the big production companies is I should say, like, because this is obviously Universal as well, but Universal was like, nah, Jason, you got this one. Like, you take care of everything. And then he just put out 7 other very, very small budget movies in order to pay for it, so it's fine.
Exactly.
But yeah, I was disappointed with this movie. Like, it's such a weird thing because like I like this movie, but I'm disappointed it wasn't better. And it's because there are things in it that could have been great. And so it's a little disappointing to be like, I like the idea of Tommy rallying up the town as if, like the end of Spider-Man 1, the like, you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us kind of thing. Like, I love that concept of getting everybody together to overcome this shitty thing. But like, it just didn't play out as well as I wanted it to. And then like, there's the fact that it's kind of written into a corner with Laurie because it's like, she's sidelined. There's you can't not sideline her if you're going to do immediate moments following up the last movie. Like, she got wrecked. So, but like on like you said, like the kills are a pretty main factor about this franchise. And even though I could still pick apart certain things about the kills, like in the firefighter scene, it's like just some weird movement going on with the way Michael moves. He seems a lot more limber in that scene. And then like with the playground scene, the convenience factor of like kicking the door into the gun, like it didn't play like a Michael Myers kill, so it, for me anyway.
Well,
So
we saw the movie in a theater with a lively crowd, I'll say, and
probably the best way to do it, because
and
I
that
watched
was
it
a
at
moment,
home. So
that was a moment where it really benefited from being in the crowd because no one was expecting him to do that or for
right.
that poor woman to die that way. But it was amazing to see it happen. And to your point though about the rallying everyone around this cause thing, I feel like that's one of the strengths of the movie. That I might be in the minority on though, is that it really plays to a lot of the things that audiences are yelling at the screen anytime they see a slasher movie, which is always the,
Don't
why
go
did you
in
stop?
there.
Don't go in there. Why did you stop hitting him? Keep hitting him.
Why are you going into the house and not just flipping on the lights?
Right.
That's a big part of this franchise.
Yeah, there were a couple of things in this where uh, people in the audience would say something to the screen, and then the characters would do kind of what they had asked them to do, and then it still wouldn't work out.
It would
for
still,
them.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those moments where you're like, you just have to accept as an audience member, where you're like, oh, I think I'm smarter than the characters because I'm not in the movie. I'm in the audience. I'm just watching it. But what the movie is telling me is that even if I do the things that you're telling me to do, it's still not going to work out.
Yeah, it's still Michael Myers. Yeah. Yeah, that's sort of where I'm like, I'm wishing it was just a little, like, played out a little bit differently, because it's obviously playing off the fact that, like, it's not just Laurie's trauma. It's Laurie and her family's trauma, and it's Laurie and her family's and the town's trauma. Because the entirety of the first movie, the unsettling part of it is that it's a safe suburb and there's just a fucking weird guy going around suddenly killing people. And it's the whole idea of there's no safe space anymore. And so to see the town, or to see the concept of the town getting behind this, like, no, we're taking this back. We're done. I love the idea, but the execution just didn't hit quite as hard as I wanted it to, where it's like, it's sort of turn on a dime for some people. Like, obviously the bar, sure, they're drinking, it's easier to rally people up like that, I guess. But like, there's some people in the bar that feel like they don't have any idea what he's talking about, what Tommy's talking about. But then suddenly they're like, yeah, fucking evil dies tonight. Yeah. I love the cheesiness of that, like, rallying cry that just continues through the whole movie. But like, it doesn't necessarily play the best at all times, which is, a little unfortunate when, like, the actor from the first movie does say it, and it's a weird delivery of it where he's like, I have been waiting 40 years, evil dies to, like, there's a little,
well, it's funny because they play it off as like the opposite of a little slogan on like a donation thing at the bar that says love lives today, and then she goes, but evil dies tonight, and you're like, all right, that's fucking corny as hell. But
that's the good 80s kind of schlock of, like, leaning into it. But like, it's this weird thing where, like, props to David Gordon Green for going a different route and being like, I want to do different things. But like, there is some whiplash from the last movie to this movie that, like, I just unfortunately can't get past. Like, I will probably rewatch all of these going into the next movie, but other than that, like, it's just gonna be the original in 2018 for me again. I mean, who knows what happens with Ends? I may adore Ends, but like,
Mills will just sort of be the semi necessary outlier that you have.
This is like a novella.
Yeah.
Like, it's granted, it's a novella that's longer than the novel that preceded it, but it's a novella nonetheless, where it's just like, it's a little bit of a circuit. Like, so the last movie was like basically most of the day.
Yeah.
And then this is basically like almost real time. Like, it's a little more stretched out. It's maybe like 3.5 hours of like real time, but like, it's condensed. It's a lot of stuff in a condensed period of time, and it's a little jumbled and clunky, and I just wish I enjoyed it more. That's like, I have a hard time seeing myself like revisiting this in a way that I'm like, yeah, let's get back to it.
Well, one thing that I felt was consistent from 18 to Kills, though, was the score by John Carpenter,
Absolutely.
his son Cody, and then I'm blanking on the name of the third gentleman that helps them. But the score is tremendous, and there's a moment that is my favorite moment in the movie that I've referred to as the "Let's Dance" moment, which is when Michael has been unmasked and he's chasing Karen to get his mask back, and his mask is now laying in the road, and he's surrounded by everyone in Haddonfield.
Yep.
And there's like a pause in the score, and then as soon as he picks up his mask to put it back on, there's this great track that plays that is, it's fantastic. That's my absolute favorite moment in the movie, of him putting the mask on and being like, all right, let's do this.
It's like it's almost a hero moment for him.
Yeah.
Which is a cool play on it. Something about that too, though, like with Anthony Michael Hall, I love that they were just like, who can we get that can replicate Anthony Michael Hall's role from Edward Scissorhands? Let's just get Anthony Michael Hall to do it again. Because
the actor who played Tommy Doyle in the original movie, I don't know the gentleman's name, but I don't think he's still working, so that's probably why they didn't go with him. And then not to mention that Paul Rudd wasn't going to come back, because if he did, then you have people wondering, all right, does 6 count? Do 4, 5, and 6 count now if Paul Rudd's in this movie? But
that is one thing that I'm like, I criticize the idea of just casting an actor who has played an identical role before, but also it's Anthony Michael Hall, and I fucking love Anthony Michael Hall. So it's like, I can't be too mad out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope coming out of this one, I mean, it's going to be hard because obviously they were filmed like basically back to back.
They haven't shot ends yet.
Oh, they haven't? Oh, they were probably finishing up the last one when the pandemic hit.
Exactly, yeah. And then so they're filming that one come the start of 2022, and that'll put them in a similar time frame to when they shot 18, because they didn't start shooting that until winter 2018.
They wanted to test the waters with the last one first before they. Yeah,
I think so, and then partially a pandemic thing.
Right. So that's interesting too, because the more I think about it, the more I'm like, some of those like black background shots actually feel like they could have been like pandemic pickups.
I mean, they might have been.
Yeah, because they're isolated. There's like they're supposed to be in the middle of the street with like the car's headlights turned on with a crowd around them, but it's.
And it wouldn't have been, they did pickups on 2018. I don't know that anyone's ever spoken about this, on the record, but it's been pretty heavily talked about in whispers that they totally redid the ending for 2018. Like, they did a test screening and it didn't play, and then they redid it. So the whole thing with the trap and the fire and everything in the 2018 movie, that was all reshoots.
Reshoot Funhouse, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that is like the most hype that movie gets, is like when they get control back and when they feel like they're getting a win. Similarly to like A Quiet Place, it's just like that final pump of the shotgun in A Quiet Place. It's like,
right, yeah.
You leave being like, fuck yeah. Which is like with this movie, Maybe they wanted to end on an Empire Strikes Back. Maybe they wanted to end on like a, well, this is the middle adventure where you kind of just don't get any resolution necessarily to what you want.
I think they were aiming for Empire Strikes Back, but I think they landed on Matrix Reloaded.
Yeah, which is
fine. So divisive.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fine. Like, it's similarly to that franchise. Like, this will have the people who are gung ho for this version. And it's. I think this movie is more for classic horror schlock fans than like super serious horror fans, where it's like, they're gonna like this more than like Invisible Man from last year.
Yeah. It was one of the last things before.
Yeah. I lucked out with my final pre-pandemic movie, which was Birds of Prey. So, although if it was Sonic the Hedgehog, would have been fine with that too. I enjoyed that quite a bit. But yeah, I'm just hoping they can kind of like get it a little more balanced between the two tones that they've now gone for with these last two movies.
I think that might be where they're headed, because I feel like with Kills, they were definitely aiming more for that. I saw someone make the comparison where they were like, rather than make a Halloween sequel with Halloween Kills, they made a Friday the 13th movie.
Right. Yeah.
And so with Ends, I feel like you're going to get kind of the best of both of those things, which is like, we know there's going to be kind of a time jump between the two movies, and I don't know how they're going to quite explain, what happened really between those. So I'm interested to see that, but I think I think you will see the best of 18 and Kills in Ends sort of represented, but I'm also totally willing and interested in being surprised with whatever they decide to do.
Period drama.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Honestly,
jumping in the DeLorean and going back to the 1800s.
Part of me wonders if, at one point, David Gordon Green wanted to just totally do a movie set in '78, and he got that out of his system by doing the flashbacks in this movie.
Right.
But seeing them, I'm like, it would have been kind of cool. I'd have been into it.
It definitely would have been. Like, it's kind of a bummer to think about that, like, we could get more flashback stuff, but it's not going to be like this. Right. It would be like maybe Loomis sitting with Michael in a session or something, as opposed to like the exact events. Cause that is probably the best part of this movie, is just how fascinating it is that they were able to recapture the look, the feel, everything about the original movie in that 8-9 minute span. So yeah,
that's another thing I really enjoyed about the movie. Being a fan I've seen the original so many times, and I know they did this just because they've sort of talked about it in interviews and stuff, but like they really got the geography down of the Myers house. It's the exact same scale. It's the right size. If you know the path of that opening one shot of through the back door, through the kitchen living room, up the stairs into Judith's bedroom, and then back out, it's perfect. And then that was another thing that I really appreciated just from the perspective of really loving that original movie, was that not only how much care and detail and attention went into creating the flashbacks, but creating the house. And even in the modern context, it still feels like the house.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of the one shot, like, that's something that I feel like this movie was kind of missing, because the last movie, not necessarily a one shot, but like sort of tried to capture the feel of the one shot when he first has the kids bump into him and he goes into the house. And I do, like, that's another thing. Like, I feel like that's a staple thing that you have to like bring forward, and it'd be cool to see some more of that with Ends. That's all I'm, because it is just something that sticks out.
And to that point, they do replicate the the next shot right after the one shot in the original 78,
right.
when, you know, in the 78 one, it's the slow pan out from child Michael Myers being unmasked by his parents. And in this one, it's the police that have apprehended him outside the Myers house.
Yeah.
It's that similar slowly backwards, you know, everything seems slow motion, but it's not quite. It's actually playing out, you know,
it's just
time.
A slow zoom out. That's
with the score, you know,
or a dolly move, probably.
Slowly.
Yeah.
But that is one thing that I quite liked about this movie is that they don't really because they've wiped the slate clean from the sequels. There's not really a mythology other than he was a guy that killed teenagers, you know, killed his sister when he was a kid and then killed teenagers in the 70s. Right. And then, you know, in 2018 they just sort of built on the, you know, the fact of, you know, killer guy in a creepy mask. And in this one they put a lot of importance on the Myers house specifically.
Yeah.
Where they're like, you know, they say they have the line that's literally like, you can draw a line from where he's been to where he's headed, which is the Myers house. And, you know, a lot of importance of, you know, that's where he went after the events of the 78 movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he goes after he kills all of the mob that was trying to kill him. Is he just goes back home, and that plays a lot into the, you know, the night he came home. It's all about going home for him.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's an interesting twist on the mythology because it leaves things open enough in a way where you're like, they're not really grounding him or putting any rules on him other than like the house is like this weird important space for him, and you're not answering really any questions about it either. And that's kind of the beauty of the original movie, is that it's so open to interpretation that all these sequels have reinvented and reinterpreted and redone their own thing with why he doesn't die, and, you know,
he's become much more supernatural in those movies. And it is cool that they're not definitively saying one thing or another, but they lean towards he's a guy. But like the stuff with the house is like almost like a spirit of the house that like is what's embodying him almost. And that's what I think is kind of cool with the way that they nodded to other stuff in 2018 too, where it's like they're sort of picking and choosing little individual things to nod to without having to, you know, dive into grand mythology, because the mythology from a standpoint in this movie and the last movie is just the legend that the town has made him, as opposed to like, yeah, he's a fucking demon. Like, so it's
cult, and or he's going after his family and whatever.
And yeah, so it's cool to see like the way they're going with that, with just like our perspective of the myth and legend of Michael Myers is just because of the myth and legend in the town now, the urban legend sort of that grew over 40 years. So that is a cool thing that they're following with that, which will I hope they don't go into the mythology stuff too much on the next one, because that would be a little too close to the other sequels that.
Right. I don't know if they will, but they do have the line of dialogue. Jamie Lee Curtis has the line of dialogue at the end where she's talking about how
fear,
you know, a normal man couldn't have survived all that. You know, as he kills, he sort of transcends, which is an interesting, you know, take on, you know, the mythology of, you know, him as the boogeyman.
Well, I think that's sort of like the more referencing like Ed Gein kind of stuff, where it's like it's clearly a mindset of like real life serial killer stuff. And that's sort of, I think that's probably, it's not victim mentality. That's obviously a different thing, but like, you know where I'm going with that, where it's like, it's her POV of his sort of spirit, or like whatever is pushing him. So like I like that there's like an in-universe out for the supernatural stuff.
That's where I was headed, was that it's a unique explanation for the why he didn't die after all these people have beaten him with baseball bats and shot him like 5. He got shot 5 times already in 1978, and then he gets shot 5 more times in 2018. So it's
he's a large man.
Yeah, for sure.
Bullets are small.
Not to sound braggy, but one of the very last set visits I ever did at my old job was I went to the set of the 2018 Halloween movie.
Yeah,
and talked to David Gordon Green, talked to Jamie Lee Curtis, and we interviewed Nick Castle and James Jude Courtney, who James Jude Courtney does most of the Michael Myers stuff in 2018 and kills and presumably ends. And Nick Castle does a little bit because Castle was friends with Carpenter and played the Shape in 78. And
honors the legacy.
You're right, but James Jude Courtney is a very intimidating dude. Even to see in person, and you get glimpses of him a little bit. Yeah. But looking at him and then seeing all the injuries that Michael takes in this movie, you're like, I believe it. I believe that he could survive it, even if in continuity of the Halloween, Michael Myers is 60 years old. I buy it.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Like, if someone was to like go and interview that actor, it's just like, even if you're put in a chair that is to compensate the height differential, it's still like, all right, how you doing? Yeah. You're always small, no matter how high up you are with somebody like that. So,
for sure.
Cool. Well, I'm gonna say that's a cool little story to end on. That the set visit story there. Once again, why don't you tell folks where they can find you on the internets?
I'm at the Spencer Perry on Twitter and Letterboxd. That's about where most of my internet silliness goes down.
Perfect. Cool. Well, thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, man.
This is super fun. I'm glad I was actually able to talk about these movies because it would not happen without a guest. So thanks again, and we will see you with a new episode soon. Bye.